So I'm doing my presentation over genetically modified organisms, or GMOs. Let me ask you a question. Have you ever had like a Halloween candy, Kit Kat or Snickers or anything like that, or beer, American beer, Corona, anything? They're going to have genetically modified organisms in it. That's how they can produce them in mass quantities. So what a GMO is. A GMO is an organism whose genome has been altered by the techniques of genetic engineering so that the DNA contains one or more genomes not normally found in it. This is extract, insert, and express. What they'll do is they'll take two parent organisms, take DNA from a foreign body, put them in these parents, and then have these parents mate, and their children would express that after a while. This does not replace traditional breeding, it just adds another step into the process. Mainly, agriculture and medicine use GMOs, but it has been used for for industrial uses. Proponents of GMOs will call them biotech, genetically engineered organisms, or genetically enhanced organisms, while opponents of this will call them genetically altered or frankenfoods. The history of GMOs. 1935, DNA was discovered by a Russian scientist. It is important to start the history of GMOs here because without the discovery of the DNA, which all GMOs are, is taking parts of DNA and putting them into another, you wouldn't have the process or technology at all. 1980, the first GMO patent was issued, and it was issued to General Electric in a landmark Supreme Court case where they stated the patent where an organism could be counted as intellectual property. And their GMO was a bacteria or bacterium that survived off eating crude oil. GE sold this to companies and governments as used to clean up oil spills. 1994, the first GMO, which was a tomato, was taken to grocery stores. 1994, Monsanto received a patent for Roundup Ready corn, which is the best seller of all GMO products. And in 1999, GMO crops surpassed that of organically grown crops. This is a map that we've all seen, and it's the world population and the future world population. Currently, right now, 2014, we're at about 7 billion people, and it's expected in the next 36 years to go up to 9.5 billion people. Most of this growth is going to happen in developed nations, and as you can see, developing nations, and as you can see, developed nations are really going to level out. But India, China, and African, Middle East, and Western or Eastern Europe are going to show the biggest increase of population. And this is important also because India is not that big, China is not that big, and the rest of the world doesn't have that much money. So they're going to need some kind of cheap food if they're going to actually have this increase of population. Right now in the United States, you can see as a graph that production or cultivation of GMO crops is on the rise, to say the least. There are two major types of GMO crops. One is Bacillus thuringiensis, which is insect resistant, which means that you don't have to spread as much pesticide. And there's herbicide tolerant or herbicide resistant, HT, and that's known as Roundup Ready. That means you can plant and spray without having to harm the actual crop that you want. GMO production in the United States, as you can see, soybeans, 95% of all soybeans are GMOs. Corn is at 85%, 75% of all canola, and 70% of all cotton are GMO crops in the United States currently, 2014. Global trends. As you can see, the same is global. Now, the United States production of these crops obviously has a huge footprint in this, but other places like India, China, Argentina, Brazil, and Canada that are big agricultural centers also have also showing increases in GMO production. Now, Brazil and Argentina and Canada do this because they have space and land, but India and China use GMO because they have higher yields and they have so many people to feed. These graphs are done by millions of hectares, which is 10,000 meters squared. Opponents of GMOs like Greenpeace and Whole Foods, Millions Against Monsanto, organic consumers associations. They have different interests and different. They hold a different stake in what they want. There's an ethical argument as to changing some organism into something else. Others are, like Greenpeace, don't want their choices taken away, the choice between organic or GMO. There was a study done in 2012 by a French scientist whose name I cannot pronounce. But he wanted to research the effects of Roundup Ready tolerant genetically modified maize or corn. And his experiment was done on 200 rats, 100 males, 100 females, and it was a 10-year experiment. It resulted that of the rats that ate the corn, 50% were more likely to die earlier than the rats that didn't eat the corn, that didn't eat the genetically modified corn. There was some serious controversy, and after he published his results, his results were widely discredited for many reasons. One, they found out that the research was funded by Greenpeace. These particular kinds of rats only lived for 2 years, and before eating the genetically modified organisms were susceptible to tumors and cancer. The experiment group of 200 rats was too small, and you needed 650 rats to remove all statistical or most statistical anomalies. At first, the findings, because the scientist was well respected, produced panic, especially in Europe. But afterwards, the data in the scientific community just outrightly discredited them. Proponents of GMO and those who say it's safe are World Health Organization, FDA, USDA, Patent Office, the Rockefeller Foundation, which is important for the Green Revolution in the 70s with Norman Borlaug. ConAgra and Monsanto were obviously proponents for GMOs because they sell them. But all the other organizations say that they're healthy, or say that they're not any more dangerous or unreasonably dangerous as compared to organic crops. Where they come from is that the biggest consumers of GMOs are cows, pigs, and chickens, and no increase of disease and no death rate increase has happened since genetically modified organisms, genetically modified corn and soybeans, have gone into their food supply. They see it, scientific community sees it, as just another step in artificial selection, artificial breeding. Look at modern apples and natural apples. These were done by artificial selection. Modern apples are big and they're juicy and they're sweet and they're nice to eat. Natural apples are smaller, they are bitter, they're not as sweet, and this was done by just artificially selecting the biggest and the sweetest apples, and what you have now is something that is a big seller and something you can sell. Same thing with a lot of vegetables. Nightshade is the ancestor of almost 50% of all vegetables. Tomatoes, eggplants, peppers, all these started as something else and have been artificially bred, artificially selected to what you know as a tomato or a pepper today. The future of GMOs. Monsanto's Roundup Ready patent expires at the end of this year. Right now they have the market on herbicide-resistant, herbicide-tolerant crops. Once that patent is over with, generic GMO seeds can go on the market, and as such, the price will drop, and it'll become more of a market system where the seeds will be available at lower prices. That means developing nations that cannot afford those seeds can have those seeds, and their yields will rise. That would be more food available to more people for less money, essentially. GMO could be the tool for ending world hunger because of the future possibilities. You could have drought-resistant crops. You could grow them in sub-Saharan Africa or near desert regions where water is scarce. A blight-resistant potato, which would reduce famine outbreaks. Fungal-resistant rice and flood-resistant rice, which is a killer for rice crops in the Far East. Frost-resistant crops, Canada and Russia could develop these crops. So in their areas where frost is prevalent, and then salt-resistant crops like in desert regions and stuff like that. I think that GMOs are going to be the future, not necessarily because they're better, but because you can make them cheaper and you can make them in such great quantity, higher yields for the poorer nations of the world that are going to need these crops. I don't think that the choice will be taken out for the developed nations between organic or GMO, but I think that nations who will need them are going to use them, and I think they're going to help in world hunger in at least our generation. Thank you.